Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 700 Club. I'm Andrew Knox. Negotiations to end the 3-year Russia-Ukraine war will begin as soon as possible. President Donald Trump made the announcement after a phone call with Russian President Vladimir Putin yesterday.
Trump is moving quickly to lay the groundwork for negotiations. European leaders say he might be moving too fast. Dale Hurd has the story.
Trump spent 90 minutes on the phone with Russian President Vladimir Putin, with the two leaders agreeing to start negotiations immediately to end the war between Russia and Ukraine.
I also had with President Zelensky a very good call after that. And I think we're on the way to getting peace. I think President Putin wants peace, and President Zelensky wants peace, and I want peace. I just want to see people stop getting killed.
The president said his first sit-down with Putin could be in Saudi Arabia soon, but also suggested he may go to Russia and that Putin might come to the United States.
I'll be dealing with President Putin largely on the phone, and we ultimately expect to meet. In fact, we expect that he'll come here and I'll go there and we're going to meet.
Trump indicated his second meeting will be with Ukrainian President Zelensky, who posted this photo of the phone call on X, saying no one wants peace more than Ukraine. As President Trump said, let's get it done. In a meeting with Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, Zelensky said,
I'm thankful to the president, to his message that he will support Ukraine and he really wants to stop this war. And I know that he's a strong man, and I'm sure that he will push Putin.
Trump also indicated Ukraine would have to give up territory lost to the Russian invasion.
Well, he's going to have to do what he has to do, but, you know, his poll numbers aren't particularly great, to put it mildly.
Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth at NATO headquarters also all but ruled out Russia having to return Crimea to Ukraine, which Russia invaded and annexed in 2014.
We must start by recognizing that returning to Ukraine's pre-2014 borders is an unrealistic objective. Chasing this illusionary goal will only prolong the war and cause more suffering.
This is similar to what Zelensky himself said earlier this year and at the end of last year, that it's not realistic. Ukraine doesn't have the ability to take back these territories by force. So Ukraine would be prepared to have a ceasefire and pursue the return of its territories by other means, diplomatic, political, and so forth.
NATO allies are insisting that Europe and Ukraine not be cut out of the peace negotiations. And Zelensky says he'll reject any deal that doesn't include Ukraine's input. Hegseth stressed the U.S. commitment to NATO and says the negotiations are not a betrayal of Ukrainian soldiers defending their nation. Meanwhile, in a historic move, Ukraine has established an annual National Day of Prayer. The date, February 24th, the anniversary of the Russian invasion. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Thank you, Dale. CBN senior international correspondent George Thomas has made many trips to Ukraine reporting on the war. He joins us now. George, what's the reaction from your Ukrainian contacts to this announcement?
A key pastor in Kyiv this morning, Andrew, sent me this note. He says, we are broken by the cynical policy towards Ukraine. Of course, we want the war to stop, but we know that Russia cannot be trusted. They always violate all agreements. We keep praying and believing for a just peace for Ukraine. Another person said, we have no illusions about the world and its values and priorities. We have lots of peacemakers, but very few allies. Everyone wants the war to end. But if you think that you're going to solve this by compromising with Russia, you need to know you don't understand them. They are just postponing this. They want to give Russia enough time to recover, and then they will attack us again. And a leading opinion in one of Ukraine's largest newspapers and widely held newspapers says, God bless America, but God help Ukraine and Europe fend for themselves.
Wow. The U.S. position is no NATO membership for Ukraine, no U.S. troops in Ukraine, and Ukraine should concede some of the land lost to Russia. How does this affect Ukraine's bargaining position?
Yeah, I mean, I think, Andrew, on the face of it, it does sound pretty awful that Ukraine really comes to the table really behind the 8 ball. But I think what Pete Hegseth and the president have always said, this is about getting an immediate ceasefire. So in these negotiations to get to that ceasefire, obviously talking about Ukraine entering NATO is a non-starter for the Russians. The whole idea of going back to the pre-2014 borderlines is also a non-starter. And the idea of deploying U.S. troops on the ground, again, this is the whole idea. The main focus of the Trump administration, and has been from the get-go of the campaign, has been to create the environment for an immediate ceasefire. And this is what the negotiations that the Trump administration has said will start immediately, is to get to this point, and these other issues will be dealt with later.
What about defending Ukraine? Are NATO and European nations going to step up and do so?
Look, I think what Pete Hegseth did yesterday at the Munich Security Council is to really send a very, very new message from this administration, that the United States' priority is no longer on the security of Europe. In fact, he went on to say that the Europeans should create this sort of shared labor. It's in your neighborhood. You guys need to take care of this. You need to provide the security guarantee for Ukraine. Zelensky said within hours of President Trump's phone call with Putin, says there is no condition that we can guarantee our own security with the Europeans unless the United States is involved in that equation. So we'll see in the days and weeks ahead what that security guarantee will look like for the Ukrainians.
All right, George, thank you so much for being with us. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
In other news, more than 2 million people worldwide are living in dangerous conditions and need a place of refuge. While the United States has a history of giving shelter to refugees, resettlements have been temporarily stopped. And that move worries organizations seeking to help desperate people. Charlene Aaron has a story.
This country's first refugee legislation came in 1948, helping almost 500,000 Europeans flee communist regimes. Since 1975, the U.S. has admitted almost 4 million refugees. Now, Homeland Security has 90 days to determine whether the program should restart, something resettlement advocates say creates challenges, especially for persecuted Christians. In his first day in office, President Trump suspended refugee admissions with an executive order that stated the country lacks the ability to absorb large numbers of migrants, and in particular refugees. Matt Sorens, a vice president with World Relief, says this action had a negative impact on families awaiting resettlement.
Because our staff have had to call family members who are already here in the United States, who've been resettled in recent months or years or decades, and who had loved ones who perhaps had been waiting in a refugee camp 10, 15, 20 years, who finally had been approved for resettlement, and we had a travel date, and we've had to call and let the stateside folks know that, at least for the immediate future, that travel has been canceled. And it's a devastating conversation to have.
While the executive order calls for a 90-day review, agencies like World Relief that rely on government funds worry about budget cuts following the president's new deportation order and immigration policies.
We still believe we have an obligation to those whom we have already invited to fly to the United States. Our government arranged those flights. We made a commitment to them that we provide some very basic support. They've got basic food and other basic necessities so that we can help them then to find a job, to be economically self-sufficient.
Open Doors USA serves persecuted Christians around the globe, and CEO Ryan Brown applauds America's long-standing policies of welcoming refugees.
Things is the U.S. has historically just been that beacon, if you will, that symbol of hope, that of a place where the weary and huddled masses are able to receive that sanctuary.
According to his organization, current reports indicate around 380 million Christians worldwide are persecuted because of their faith. That would include places like Sudan, Iran, Iraq, and Myanmar, where following Jesus can lead to imprisonment, violence, or worse. Brown says if the U.S. dramatically reduces or ends its resettlement program, those fleeing religious persecution, are likely to be affected.
The majority of the Christians that we work with, they recognize that they have an opportunity in the midst of their persecution. For those that are denied opportunity, it is, for some of them, it is the net effect is a death sentence, because they have literally no other opportunities, with the persecution that they are facing. For the U.S. to close its borders from those that needing and seeking that sanctuary because of their faith in Christ, it's a discouraging message.
Charlene Aaron, CBN News.
What an incredible reminder. I mean, I know this country has a myriad of problems. You see them as well, but so many yearn to live in this country with the freedoms and protections that we take for granted every day. It's a reminder of the blessings we have in the United States. And of course, as this administration seeks to get our act together at the border and take care of illegal crossings, perhaps keeping our commitments to those already promised sanctuary is certainly something to consider.